FBI manhunt ends with shocking father-son confrontation that exposed America's most calculated political assassination. The most intense FBI manhunt in recent American history came to a shocking end when a father recognized his own son as the country's most wanted fugitive. What happened next would reveal the cold, calculated nature of a political assassination that has left the nation reeling and searching for answers about how far political hatred can drive someone to kill. It started as an ordinary Tuesday evening at Utah Valley University in Provo, Utah. Students were settling into their seats in the packed auditorium, waiting to hear from Charlie Kirk, the well-known conservative activist and founder of Turning Point USA. Kirk had given hundreds of these campus speeches across the country, often facing protests, but never serious violence. The 31-year-old political figure was known for his fiery conservative messages and massive social media following, making him a polarizing but influential voice in American politics. At exactly 7:43 p.m. Mountain Time, everything changed in an instant. Gunshots rang out across the crowded venue, shattering the evening's normalcy and plunging hundreds of students into pure terror. People screamed and dove under seats, desperately trying to escape what had suddenly become a killing ground. On stage, Charlie Kirk collapsed as blood pooled beneath him, his political career and life ending in the most violent way imaginable. Campus security rushed toward the stage while paramedics fought desperately to save Kirk's life, but their efforts proved futile. At 8:17 p.m., just over 30 minutes after the shooting began, Charlie Kirk was pronounced dead. The conservative activist who had spent years defending free speech on college campuses had become the victim of the very political violence he had often warned about. Within minutes, emergency responders locked down the entire university campus. Every building was searched from top to bottom. Every vehicle leaving the area was stopped and inspected. Every person on campus was questioned about what they had seen or heard. But the shooter had vanished into the Utah night like a ghost, leaving behind only chaos, terror, and a dead political figure whose assassination would shake American politics to its core. The FBI received notification about the shooting at 8:24 p.m. and special agents were immediately dispatched from the Salt Lake City field office. They arrived on scene within 45 minutes, and by 10 p.m. that night, federal investigators had taken complete control of the case. This wasn't just another campus shooting. It was the assassination of a major political figure making it a federal crime that would demand the full resources of America's premier law enforcement agency. FBI agents worked through the entire night, interviewing hundreds of witnesses who had seen the shooting unfold. They collected every piece of physical evidence they could find, from bullet casings to security camera footage. What they discovered painted a chilling picture of a carefully planned assassination carried out with deadly precision. The gunman had positioned himself strategically in the crowd, waited for the perfect moment to strike, then fired multiple shots before disappearing back into the panicking masses. Security footage revealed disturbing details about how the attack unfolded, but the shooter's face remained partially hidden from the cameras. Witnesses described a young man about 5 feet 10 inches tall with dark hair, wearing a black hoodie and jeans. Beyond these basic details, descriptions varied wildly as people struggled to remember specifics from those terrifying moments when their lives were in danger. By Thursday morning, FBI forensic teams had made their first major breakthrough. Working through the night to analyze evidence from the crime scene, they discovered fingerprints on a discarded water bottle that would change everything. Those prints belonged to Tyler Robinson, a 22-year-old Utah native with no prior criminal record. His driver's license photo matched witness descriptions perfectly, giving investigators their first solid lead in the case. But finding Tyler Robinson proved to be far more challenging than anyone had anticipated. He had no permanent address where authorities could look for him. He had no steady job that would give them a starting point. He had no close friends who could provide information about where he might be hiding. Even family members claimed they hadn't seen him in months, making him seem like a ghost who had simply vanished from normal society. The FBI immediately released Robinson's photograph to every law enforcement agency in the state and began what would become one of the most intensive manhunts in American history. His face appeared on wanted posters, television screens, and social media feeds across the country. Thousands of law enforcement officers and federal agents joined the search, but Robinson remained one step ahead of capture. The manhunt reached its turning point in the most unexpected way possible. FBI agents had distributed Robinson's photograph to local news stations, hoping that someone in the community would recognize the suspect and provide information about his whereabouts. That someone turned out to be the person who knew him better than anyone else in the world, his own father. David Robinson was watching the evening news when his son's face suddenly filled the television screen. The moment was absolutely devastating. The young man he had raised, loved, and worried about for 22 years was now America's most wanted fugitive, accused of one of the most shocking political assassinations in recent memory. The realization hit him like a physical blow, forcing him to confront an impossible choice between protecting his child and doing what he knew was morally right. For hours, David Robinson wrestled with the decision that would change both their lives forever. He understood that turning in his own son would likely send Tyler to death row, but he also knew that harboring a fugitive would make him an accomplice to murder. The internal struggle was agonizing, pitting every parental instinct against his sense of civic duty and moral obligation to Charlie Kirk's family and the broader community. Friday evening brought the phone call that would end the manhunt. David Robinson contacted the FBI tip line and identified his son as the suspected shooter, but instead of immediately revealing Tyler's location, he made an unusual request. He asked for permission to speak with his son first, hoping he could convince Tyler to surrender peacefully rather than face the violent confrontation that often ends police manhunts. FBI agents agreed to the plan, recognizing that a peaceful surrender would be safer for everyone involved. They arranged for David to call his son Saturday morning, while federal agents monitored every word of the conversation. What they heard during that call would shock even experienced law enforcement officers who thought they had seen everything. When David confronted his son about the shooting, Tyler Robinson's response was immediate, clear, and absolutely chilling. Without any hesitation, denial, or attempt to minimize his actions, he confessed to assassinating Charlie Kirk. The words came out matter-of-factly, as if he were discussing the weather rather than admitting to one of the most serious crimes possible. "I shot him," Tyler told his father during the monitored phone call. "I've been planning this for months." The confession stunned everyone listening, but it also revealed something even more disturbing about the assassination. This wasn't a spontaneous act of violence committed in a moment of anger or passion. It was a carefully calculated murder that had been planned and prepared for months in advance. But Tyler Robinson wasn't ready to face the consequences of his actions. When his father urged him to surrender to authorities, Tyler's response revealed the depth of his desperation and the challenge facing FBI negotiators. "I would rather kill myself than turn myself in," he told his father, his voice filled with a resolve that terrified everyone monitoring the conversation. FBI crisis negotiators immediately stepped into the dialogue, working alongside David Robinson, to convince Tyler that surrender was his only viable option. For hours, they painted stark pictures of what would happen if he chose to run, or even worse, if he chose to end his own life. They explained that running would only make things worse and that suicide would devastate his family while solving nothing. The breakthrough in negotiations came when Tyler's mother joined the conversation. Her tears and emotional pleas finally reached through her son's defiance and desperation. Slowly and carefully, she convinced Tyler that living to face justice was better than dying as a fugitive or taking his own life. The conversation stretched through Saturday night and into Sunday morning, with federal agents maintaining constant communication, while tactical teams positioned themselves for multiple scenarios. At 9:15 a.m. on Sunday morning, Tyler Robinson walked into the Weber County Sheriff's Office accompanied by both of his parents. His peaceful surrender marked the end of America's most intensive manhunt in years, a search that had consumed thousands of law enforcement officers and federal agents across multiple states. The scene outside the sheriff's office was surreal, with news crews from across the nation creating a media circus around what should have been a solemn moment of justice. FBI agents escorted Robinson through a crowd of reporters and photographers, his head hanging down and his hands secured behind his back. The image of America's most wanted fugitive being led into custody instantly became symbolic of how political violence had reached American soil in ways that many people thought were impossible in modern times. Inside the sheriff's office, Robinson underwent the standard booking process that transforms fugitives into prisoners. Fingerprints, photographs, and paperwork officially changed his status from wanted suspect to criminal defendant facing the most serious charges possible under American law. But for FBI investigators, his capture marked the beginning of an even larger investigation into how and why this assassination had occurred. FBI agents immediately began intensive questioning of Tyler Robinson about his motives, his planning process, and whether he had any accomplices who helped him carry out the assassination. What they discovered painted an extremely disturbing picture of obsession, radicalization, and months of careful preparation for murder. Robinson had been following Charlie Kirk's career for over 2 years, and his social media activity revealed an escalating pattern of anger and resentment toward Kirk's political messages and conservative activism. What had apparently started as simple political disagreement had evolved into something much darker and more dangerous over time. Investigators found detailed plans in Robinson's possession that showed just how calculated and premeditated the assassination had been. He had campus layouts showing the best positions for an attack. He had security assessments that helped him understand how to avoid detection. He had multiple escape routes planned out in case he needed to flee after the shooting. This wasn't a spontaneous act of violence committed by someone who simply snapped. It was a carefully orchestrated assassination that had been months in the making. Most troubling of all was Robinson's extensive research into Charlie Kirk's speaking schedule and travel plans. He had been tracking the conservative activist's appearances across multiple states, studying his security arrangements and looking for vulnerabilities. This suggested that Robinson had been waiting patiently for the perfect opportunity to strike, showing a level of planning and patience that made his crime even more chilling. Monday morning brought Tyler Robinson's first court appearance, where federal prosecutors had worked through the weekend to prepare charges that reflected the full severity of his crimes. Robinson faced 7 separate federal counts, including aggravated murder, felony discharge of a firearm, and obstruction of justice. Each charge carried significant prison time, but prosecutors weren't satisfied with even lengthy incarceration. During a press conference following the court hearing, District Attorney Sarah Mitchell announced the state's intention to pursue the death penalty against Robinson. Her words were measured but firm as she explained the reasoning behind seeking the ultimate punishment under American law. The assassination of Charlie Kirk was an attack on our democratic process and our fundamental right to free speech, she stated clearly. The people of Utah demand justice, and we will seek the ultimate penalty under the law. Charlie Kirk's death sent political shockwaves through American society that extended far beyond conservative circles and Republican politics. Politicians from both major parties condemned the assassination, recognizing it as an attack on the democratic process itself and the principle that political differences should be settled through debate rather than violence. Despite Robinson's confession and arrest, FBI agents continued investigating potential connections to broader networks or terrorist organizations. Federal investigators thoroughly examined his online activity, financial records, and personal relationships, searching desperately for evidence of conspiracy or coordination with other individuals or groups. Their findings surprised many political observers and complicated the narrative surrounding Kirk's death. Robinson appeared to have acted completely alone, motivated by personal obsession rather than directions from any organization. Subscribe now for complete trial coverage and updates on this case that changed American politics forever.